It is a bonus episode of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. What is this bonus episode about, you may ask? Should be obvious. We just had a vice president debate. A debate between Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz. And it wasn't nearly as exciting, but I don't think it could have been. I think we would have all fallen over if we had an event as exciting as the debate between Trump and Harris, because that was off the hook. Because you had a deranged lunatic screaming about eating the dogs. I saw it on television. You know, you had the insanity that was Trump, like, losing his mind over and over again as she triggered him. Just like, ha, 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 ha. It was So due to the nature of this podcast episode, since we're going to go through a timeline of sorts, I'm not going to do a break in the middle to give a shout out to my sponsor, so I'm going to do it very quickly right here. The only way Decoding Fox News can exist is through paid subscribers and paid supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, subscriptions start at $5 a month or $55 for the year. There's also a founding member level. You can do that as well. That's the lowest level that Substacks allows me to charge people. I went bottom because it's just one person, so I figured, well, I can't really compete with larger media companies that have a whole staff, so I went with the lowest. All paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. This week it should be Chapter 7 of Project 2025. Still making my way through that monster. And that's about it. If you can't afford to become a paid subscriber, paid supporter, you can share the podcast, share the newsletter, tell your friends, share my work on social media, give me a good review. That's about it. Now, the vice presidential debate was not nearly as exciting, but I don't think it surprised anybody how it went, because we all knew J.D. Vance, given his history and his education and background and all of that, would probably hold his own. And because Tim Walz, Governor Walz, is a seasoned politician, I also thought he would do fine. And I think they both did fine. I don't think either one of them knocked it out of the park. Walz had some great moments when he spoke about abortion, when he called him on, like, you don't trust experts. I thought that was brilliant. That was my favorite moment. He also got stronger as he went on. He had some great comments about January 6th and the election. The fact that J.D. Vance couldn't just say, yeah, the election, he couldn't say President Biden won the election. Couldn't say it, even though President Biden won the election. So those were sort of the highlights. And then, of course, the fact check moment, which we'll get to tonight. This podcast is based, there'll be a couple clips from the debate, but it's mostly how Fox covered it. So we'll kind of break down how the folks at Fox did it. And I want just, for a heads up, when I do these bonus podcasts, I fly without a net. So I have no script whatsoever. I have two pieces of paper that I hand wrote on a notepad that say who's in each video. I just wrote down the names of everybody who's speaking, and that's it. That's all I got. And I also have a note. I want to address this now before I forget. Shana Tova, everybody. If you are Jewish and you're listening to this podcast, Happy New Year. It's Rosh Hashanah. I live in an area of Brooklyn that is right next to a very large, it's mostly modern Orthodox community, so I know all about every single holiday as much as a non-Jewish person could. And I'm not married to a Jewish person. I'm completely single. Nobody's Jewish in my family. It's all Catholics, but I've lived here long enough. This is a fun one. They're all fun, but Yom Kippur is like a very somber day. Rosh Hashanah is a fun day. I highly respect my Jewish neighbors. So anyway, Happy New Year again if you are celebrating. So we're going to move on to, this is Laura Ingraham from the Igraham Angle. I started with her at 7 p.m. and these were her comments that I put together about the debate. She had kind of like half a normal show, and then she included a lot of stuff about like the debate is tonight. The debate is tonight. So here you go.
Trump's last debate was basically 3-on-1, with the moderators taking him on almost as many times as Kamala did. And after it's all over tonight, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other media outlets will all declare that Tim Walz won because he was more relatable. But at a time of don't be fooled by the aw shucks demeanor, because Walz is an extremist. Is there any daylight between him and Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from his home state? He knows they're going to pummel him with questions about his statements about Haitian food choices.
So it was really insidious of her to bring up that Haitian food choices, because at this point, that whole Haitian immigrants who are here legally, by the way, eating people's pets has been debunked. There's no evidence of it. It was a smear, a rumor that got out of hand. This is what happens to an outside group. Doesn't look like their neighbors, all of that. This is something that's old as the hills. And sadly, we live in a country where a lot of Americans, not all Americans, of course, but some Americans have a strong prejudice against people with dark skin. That doesn't help. And then you've got people who speak a different language with a different culture, and people pick on them. And that's basically what's happening. Not everybody in Springfield, of course, but it's happening. And I felt terrible for that community. And there, because I'm sure there's plenty of people who do not have a problem with their Haitian neighbors who've been very kind to them, and now this tiny community is getting harassed, and they've dealt with all these bomb threats, and there she is throwing salt in the wound. Way to go. The other joke that she mentions there, I think it's a bit of a joke, is she shows Waltz and Ilhan Omar in a photo together smiling because they're both from the same state, and then she acts like they're besties. And I'm like, okay, whatever, Laura Ingraham. So that was about all she gave me. She'll come back. We hear from her again. Next up, we have Jesse Waters, and what they did is they gave him about half of his normal time, and then they cut to this panel that they had assembled that was full of kind of like their official pre-debate show, and we'll get to that in a moment. So this is Jesse Waters, and they put him in the press pool, because this was in New York City. So he's in this press pool doing half of his show from there.
All in the backdrop of strikes, wars, and natural disasters. This debate is going to be a battle between two men for men. Harris has a man issue, and it's not just white dudes. His ties to China are under investigation, and he's been caught lying about his military record. Not to mention the way he carries himself physically has been, let's say, less than manly. Trump haters who covered up the laptop and blamed Trump for not getting shot. Now, we'd like to see Vance discredit the moderators early and demonstrate that the American First movement is running against a rigged system. But arguing with women is never a good idea, so J.D. Vance has to tread carefully.
Tim Walz's own aides talked to CNN, and when you read to the bottom of the article, Jesse, there's this quote I cannot stop laughing at. His advisors are worried that he will come off as a moron, as a raging bull, or as an out-of-whack liberal vouching for another out-of-whack liberal.
Kayleigh McEnany, ladies and gentlemen, none of that happened. I don't think Tim Walz looked like a raging bull. I don't think that he looked stupid or unintelligent. I don't think he looked rageful. He was fine. It's, again, vice presidential debate. I don't remember any in recent past that were that spicy, except for, you had Sarah Palin, you had a fly on, Mike Pence's head. That's all I remember. I just don't, they're never that eventful. But, again, Fox is entertaining. So, Jesse, as you see there, how many references to women and masculinity and men? I mean, that is just, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? I think it's safe to say that J.D. Vance and Trump both have a problem with women voters. I would add that. He just wants to say that Walz has a problem with male voters. But I think the whole Roe v. Wade and then J.D. Vance and Trump's many comments about women that are disturbing and awful. And the fact that Trump is a jury found him liable for sexual assault. And he said other women accuse him of sexual assault. Problems. The grab him by the... that one, all these horrible things. So anyway, next up we have the actual Fox pre-debate show. And I'm going to read the list of people who speak in this one. Jesse Waters, Harold Ford Jr., Sean Hannity, Kellyanne Conway, Martha McCallum, Jesse Waters, and Brett Baer. They also had Britt Hume on the panel, but he didn't really say anything that was clippable. And yeah, they just found a big, huge, desk being all dramatic. Pre-debate show. Here we go.
If I were J.D. Vance, I'd just say the ports are closed, the border's open, North Carolina's underwater, missiles are flying, Biden and Harris are in hiding. If they talk about cats, no, this is much more important than any of that. If the moderators try that, stop.
Voters have heard a lot about J.D. Vance. One of the things that the polling shows is that whether he is aligned with Project 2025 or not, he seems to be the person most identified on this ticket as being that person. Too, we've heard things about cats and dogs and things he's said about women. It'll be interesting to hear how he projects and, frankly, how he talks about these issues.
Why does she want to decriminalize illegal immigration and offer free housing, food, and health care and education, sex change surgery, and a path towards citizenship, which is amnesty? We shouldn't be talking about cats and dogs. We should be talking about murdered Americans. And Tim Walz, although he has his own issues with feminine hygiene products and bathrooms and sex-affirming care without parental consent and building 30-foot ladder factories to get over 25-foot walls. They've tried to tie Donald Trump to Project 2025, which he has said he knows nothing about.
We do not need a dad in plaid.
If he has some of this childless cat lady and all the other stuff, which I expect will come at him at some point this evening, what does he do with it?
Haitian food, stay away from that tonight. I think Jesse's right. We don't want to go to the menu. And so I think for those women voters out there that are critical, and they're losing women, the Trump-Vance ticket, they've got to think about every word they're saying to resonate with those female voices out there.
Talking to women and independents, but he's really going to be also talking to the #1 viewer, former President Trump, who is truth socialing real time this debate.
Well, I remember after the last debate, we all thought that Donald Trump could have done a better job tagging Harris with specifics. He's good with the broad strokes. She's a communist, but.
So that was an interesting little montage there. They kept saying cats and dogs because they were just anticipating. They're just anticipating that somebody would be like, hey, didn't you make up a story? Or you at least fanned the flames of a story, like you admitted in an interview that you made up a story to bring awareness, because he did say that. He said he basically made up a story to bring awareness. And again, nobody's found any evidence of this ridiculous story. Ingraham used the phrase Haitian food again, which I want to add. When Uganda passed a bunch of incredibly draconian anti-LGBTQ laws, she referred to them as they were just, oh, those are anti-sodomy laws. No big deal. Everybody's freaking out. No, I mean, it's literally like if you're caught even like renting to a gay person, you could go to prison, like renting property to a gay person, and gay people can be put to death in Uganda. It's not a joke. It's not a lighthearted thing. It's terrifying. They also mentioned this was something, I might do a separate edit of this. I didn't have time yet, but in every single show, they opened with a little montage of there's a strike, there's war in Israel, everything's going to hell. And that's basically, they kept repeating that throughout the night, different variations of that. The strike is the strike. They haven't had longshoremen haven't had a strike since 1977. I looked that one up. Oh, and then Hannity keeps bringing up sex change surgeries and feminine hygiene products. So keep an eye on that because he'll keep doing that. So that was that. I think Brett Baer put it perfectly with this is really just about, J.D. Vance really has to worry about Trump. I have a feeling though Trump wasn't actually watching it with the sound on. Like I just picture him like with an overcooked steak and like ketchup and really rewatching like a rerun of The Celebrity Apprentice. Like, look at how amazing I am. I just don't know if Trump would even understand the debate. Like, because he doesn't really understand how to debate himself. He just bullies people. He bullies people and he lies. He doesn't answer a question. That's him. So next up, we have the actual debate. This first clip, the voices that you'll hear are Senator J.D. Vance, Governor Tim Walz, and Margaret Brennan. She's one of the moderators. This is probably the most memorable a clip that everybody like watching on Twitter just went, whoa, there we go. Because both sides reacted to this one. It speaks for itself. Here we go.
I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status.
Right.
temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining.
So that was sort of the moment of the debate where, Republicans were infuriated that someone would dare fact check J.D. Vance, and then Democrats and people who would maybe vote for Kamala Harris started cheering because it was great to see him fact checked. And then J.D. Vance he just gets all worked up and he's just like, what? No, you said you were going to fact check me. And then he pivots to talk about an app, and then he attributes the app to Kamala Harris. And that is something that he did throughout the debate. I have too many examples of that, but he kept inferring that Kamala Harris could somehow write executive orders, which she cannot do. Only a president can write an executive order. You will not find anywhere any document that's an executive order written by a vice president. And I think it's interesting that they're trying to turn her into Joe Biden because they don't know what else to do. And that's their weapon. Well, we'll just say her administration. And the thing is that traditionally in the United States, the vice president is basically a living human being to replace the president if the president is killed. We do not have an adversarial situation in this country with a vice president and a president. They are on the same ticket, they're the same party, and the vice president isn't given much to do. They kind of go to a lot of events, they support what they can support, they might, pick up some pet projects, but if you're ever wondering, if you're a non-American listening to this podcast, and I know I have some listeners who are international, our vice presidents don't do a lot. If you can go back in time and go through all of the vice presidents, and most of them don't do much. They're there in case the president is killed, that we can immediately replace the president. We don't have to hold another election. We just immediately replace the president. So, they expected, and they keep saying this, they'll say this until the election, that she somehow should have been out there battling Biden, and she should have, number one, gone to the press and been like, he's in cognitive decline, we must get rid of him. They seriously expected her to do that. That's not going to happen. Nobody's going to do that because she would be immediately suspect of well, you just want his job, right? She's in a terrible position to be the person saying that. Number one. Number two, we've never had a vice president sort of say, that's it. I'm going to openly spar and fight and battle with the president. That's never happened. Dick Cheney was rumored to be secretly running the White House when George W. Bush was president. And I say rumored, I don't know, but that was what a lot of people said, that he was the one really pulling the strings. Who knows? Just because of the nature of their personalities. I don't know, but that was, again, not adversarial. He just was that type of person. So yeah, whatever, but they kept doing that. So the next clip is, I wanted something that was short. I could have included the January 6th stuff, but that was a little bit longer. This is Walz talking about abortion, and I think this is a very strong thing for him and Harris to run on given the circumstances. Here you go.
Your response.
Well, I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
So I wanted to include that clip. He doesn't go into the full story of what happened to Amber Thurman, but he did mention her, and I think it was very important that he mentioned her. And he did mention her more than once. I also think he did a good job explaining kind of the pro-choice side of things. And what happened to Amber Thurman, and I know as soon as he said that, people were all over Twitter like, lit up with say her name, say her name. This is a young mother who had a small child, got pregnant. I don't know her story. I don't know why she wanted or sought an abortion. It's not my business. But she took abortion medication. She had a very rare complication in that there's some tissue that was still inside of her. And if it doesn't come out, you know, that can kill you. You can get sepsis, you can die. And she is from Georgia, where the, you know, pregnancy restriction, the abortion restrictions are, incredibly strict. She went to a hospital. She was there for 20 hours before they finally said, you know, we're going to do a D&C, which is a very standard, not rare procedure. I have friends who've had it done for various situations. Sometimes a miscarriage, sometimes it has nothing to do with a pregnancy. You'll get a D&C because they have something's gone wrong with their uterus. It happens. So they didn't do it, and she died. And she's not the only woman. There will sadly be more women like Amber Thurman. There's another woman who had was told she couldn't get pregnant again because she was too high risk due to health reasons. She also took abortion medication, and she also died. And she didn't even go to the hospital. She didn't call anybody because she was worried she'd go to prison. I mean, it's just horrible what is happening in this country. Horrible. I understand people have very strong feelings about abortion, and I validate that. I understand that. I come from a family that's Catholic, that's very pro-life or anti-choice, depending on how you want to phrase that. I understand that, but I don't understand laws that allow healthy women to die because some lawmaker wrote something on paper that prevents a doctor from stepping in and preventing her death because there was no, pregnancy to be saved here. I also think it's tragic because we live in a country where, we have technology and healthcare where they can take a vein from your leg and put it in your heart to replace a valve, or they can, undo a blockage, or they can, completely rewire your heart in some ways. Pacemakers and all kinds of stuff that they can use to save a person's life. And that's amazing. And yet we treat women as if it's God's will if something goes wrong with a pregnancy, or in this case, abortion medication. It's baffling. It's baffling because again, it wasn't like there was a choice here between, we got one life or the other life. There was no other life. It was gone. So frustrating. She would have been 31 too, and she has a young son now who doesn't have a mother. And I think it was very powerful of Tim Walz to make sure that he said her name. Very, very powerful. So next up, we're going to go back to that big desk at Fox, and this is another panel. This is post-debate. This is like their official post-debate. This is about 25 minutes. This is Martha McCallum, Laura Ingraham, Dana Perino, Jesse Waters, Harold Ford Jr., and Bret Baier.
Walz was, I would say, good enough. Like, it's not going to hurt the ticket, likely.
I don't think I've ever seen a Republican so deftly maneuver what was smug and arrogant bias on the part of those moderators.
Dana, obviously, the Trump-Vance side is trying to reach out to improve those numbers with women. On the other side, for Harris and Walz, they need to improve their numbers with men. And you could feel both of them trying to do that at times tonight. Did they succeed?
Well, Vance did and Walz did not. You can understand why. I do think that you're going to see a lot of the media say, why can't Vance just say Trump didn't win in 2020?
Right.
And they're going to try to hang that on him. And I think there will not be another debate, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kamala Harris doesn't want that to be the last word on a national stage.
I thought it was very astute of Dana Perino to make those observations about how people would be angry about the fact that JD Vance just couldn't say, oh yeah, by the way, Trump didn't win in 2020, which he should have said, because, you know, when is this going to end? He's just going to make up his own reality and we all have to just deal with it. Because he didn't win. Don't care. He did not win. Also, Laura Ingraham attacking the moderators immediately. That's going to be a theme we're going to keep hearing about, which I thought, what? They were fine. They were fine. They had a couple fact checks. That's it. It was just, I can't. And then next up, we're going to hear from Jesse Waters, and this is a very Jesse Waters response.
Vance made zero mistakes. JD Vance, everybody thought this guy was a bad guy. They were saying he was a creep. Second question on climate change. You guys should have been doing this debate.
And for those who have tuned out Trump, because it's a long time to listen to somebody for 8 years, right? Some people love it. Some people can't take it anymore.
So yes, again, Dana Perino for the win there. That was subtle because she said it just, some people just can't take it anymore. You know, and I'm like, yeah, even Republicans can't take it anymore, can they? They can't take it anymore. We're like ready to snap over here with Trump. But yeah, true story. And then Jesse Waters just acts like a frat boy. He was great. Everything was amazing. He's the man. People thought he was creepy. He's not creepy. He's amazing. He's JD Vance. Like, okay, bro. Okay. Cool your jets. Cool your jets.
I'm not a woman, so I don't know how women are going to receive this. I saw JD Vance in a completely different light. I was very impressed by his presentation. Walz didn't have a terrible night.
Right.
He didn't screw up that badly. He had a few moments, but I'm sure the Democrats are kind of pleased with it.
I think JD kind of maneuvered that pretty well.
No blood drawn, but in a tight race like that, I think JD performed well.
I don't think the Democrats are happy tonight at all. I think they wanted him. I want JD out of their misery.
But the last question that was asked about do you accept the results, Democrats wanted that question asked. I think Dana's right. To not be able to answer that question, that would be my one knock against JD tonight.
Think about this race and how close it is, and you look at this. I mean, listen, is this going to move the needle? Probably not. Could have, maybe. But it probably isn't going to move the needle that much in the big picture of the race.
So again, the absurdity of Jesse Waters, you know, bellowing out, I'm not a woman. Really? I thought you were. I'm shocked. Your hand gestures sometimes confuse me, Mr. Waters. They sometimes very broad hand, very almost like musical theater style hand. Other people have commented. I'm not the only one that's like, what is he doing with his hands? I have very big hands. I'm a Viking. Do not have petite hands. Do not have delicate hands. I have the type of hands that could take a broadsword and just like, Not that I'm going to do that. Or a battle axe. I make jokes about battle axes all the time. I wear size like large gloves for a woman. Why? Anyway, I wore size 10 shoe when I was 12 years old. So still wear a size 10 shoe because I never got pregnant, so they never got bigger. But yes, no. True. We get that you're not a woman, Jesse Waters, was my whole point of that bizarre tangent. And then Harold Ford Jr. just nails it with like, yeah, we need to hear him say that Trump didn't win in 2020, didn't do it. And then Bret Baier just sums it up. Boom. There you go. It's a vice presidential debate. Will this move the needle? Probably not. I'm like, well, somebody's admitting it. So next up we have Sean Hannity. And again, he was in the press pool. They put him there and he's talking to his people. He gave JD Vance, let me just say this, because it was just outrageous, 18 minutes. Just like, what are we doing? It's the JD Vance show. He just had a debate, 18 minutes. He only had about, like, I want to say like 30 some odd minutes. So it's a lot of time to dedicate to just interviewing JD Vance, who just did the debate. But that's exactly what Sean Hannity did. And you're going to hear a bunch of fawning back and forth because this is how Sean Hannity interviews Republicans. It's like, you're amazing. I had a spiritual moment when I saw you on that stage. I don't know how to do Sean Hannity's voice because it's kind of a weird voice, but that's basically how Sean Hannity, I just think you are amazing and you are the best person ever. And you're brilliant, really. I look at you and I think, oh, I wish I could be that smart. You'll hear it. Here you go.
Now, Tim Walz clearly in over his head, despite plenty of assistance from the, blatantly biased CBS moderators. Walz didn't look pretty good, didn't look good in any way tonight.
I can stay that long tonight.
And as I was watching you tonight, I felt like you really got a chance to introduce yourself to the American people. And I felt it was extraordinarily effective. How do you justify sex change operations paid for by taxpayers?
She bragged about the Green New scam, which of course is one of the main drivers of energy and food prices. I legitimately believe, no kidding, that you would be a much more fair interviewer of Kamala Harris than, for example, like Dana Bash was with me.
So that's just a snippet, but it was just like 18 minutes of that. I was just like, oh, come on. Where they're both like, you're amazing. No, you're amazing, Sean Hannity. No, you're amazing, JD Vance. No, you're amazing. I can't even handle how amazing you are. Extraordinarily good. I don't think I've ever seen a vice presidential debate before in my life that was that good. It was so tremendous. I had a moment. I had to call people and say, is this happening? They said, yes, it's happening. Get a grip. And I did. And I'll never be the same again. I mean, I'm not really exaggerating. That's how bad it was for 18 minutes. Okay. I also want to point out, because they're talking about the Green New scam, and we also heard in the last clip of how dare they start with climate change. Okay. We broke heat records all over the world this year, all over the world. Phoenix had 100 days in a row of 100-degree temperatures, which broke a record. It's never happened before. And then in Europe, they had massive flooding, wildfires that just happened. Pakistan, just a couple of years ago, a third of it was underwater. A third of an entire country was underwater. Some of it will never come back. You've got catastrophes happening all over the planet right now. You have flooding and drought conditions in Africa, both happening. That's why they call it climate change, not global warming, because it causes profound changes. And then we just had this disastrous hurricane that has caused all kinds of problems in North Carolina and other states. And they're just like, yeah, climate change, who cares? Very quickly, I don't have the clip, but when JD Vance was asked about climate change, he said, oh, we want clean water, we want clean air, which that's not what climate change is about. And then he said something about we overstate this thing about carbon emissions. No, we don't. Actually, we don't. And then he said we should bring more manufacturing to the U.S. and that'll change climate change, which didn't make any sense. So the United States is the #1 consumer of crude oil in the world. We have roughly 330 million people. Normally, you would think that China and India would have been the #1 consumers of crude oil because they both each have about 1.4 billion people. They're both like incredibly populated countries. So we shouldn't be the #1 consumer of oil, but because we drive everywhere and we consume a lot and we consume a lot of energy, we are the #2 producers of carbon emissions in the world. #2. China's #1 because they have coal. And again, they have this enormous country. They burn more coal, which is very, very, very bad for the planet and carbon emissions. So we've got, just nonsensical. They just don't care. I fear for our planet if these people gain power because they're going to roll everything back. And we're at a very bad place right now in terms of the environment. So the next few voices that you're going to hear are Donald Trump Jr. and then Governor Jared Polis. He's a Democrat from Colorado. And at the very end, we're going to hear Katie Britt. So here you go.
Right. Because they're not going to have feminine hygiene products in boys' bathrooms or gender-affirming care without parental consent.
No, we're worried about policies that actually matter for Americans, not tampons in boys' bathrooms.
Green Deal's good for America, and the fact that she co-sponsored that?
I'll answer that very clearly, Sean. And first, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you having a fair and fair chance.
Why are Democrats afraid of me? I'm a nice guy.
Oh, no, I'm not afraid. Hey, look, Donald Trump once supported single-payer health care, and he said so publicly.
What was that?
It was the 90s. I mean, right?
In the 90s?
Look, here's the straight answer.
Donald Trump had Hillary Clinton at his wedding.
Look, well, yeah.
Food, housing, healthcare, education, free, taxpayer-funded sex change surgeries.
Absolutely. Look, it was one of the best debate performances in American history.
And again, this like cheerleading rah-rah. I've included her because I will always find her funny after Joe Biden. he is destroying this country, which was her response to the State of the Union address, where she was like ridiculously over the top in her green blouse with her little gold little necklace, and Joe Biden sitting in her kitchen where she had I think somebody knew the model of her refrigerator, and it was some sort of $15,000 refrigerator. She's like, I'm just a mom. No, I think you're more than just a mom, dear. Anyway. But yeah, I love that clip with Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado, because that just never happens with Hannity, where somebody just calls him on it. Like, you don't know this? And Hannity didn't know that Trump used to be pro-single payer for healthcare, and that just got Hannity's just like, oh, whatever. He went to Hillary's wedding, or Hillary Clinton and Bill went to his wedding, which is true. But that didn't, you didn't address that? You didn't address that. Anyway, I also want to add, because we just talked about it, Trump used to be pro-choice as well, and he was outspoken about this. So that just magically changed. What? Now all of a sudden he's very staunchly anti-choice, sort of anti-choice. He's not been consistent on that either. Next up, we have kind of the Z-listers on Fox. I like getting this show because sometimes you get really great clips from it. And these are people on the West Coast. This is from a show called Fox News at Night. It's hosted by Trace Gallagher. And it's a bunch of people you've never heard of. So I'm going to break this down. We have Erin Perny. She's from Axiom Strategies. I think she's some type of political consultant. Lauren Wright, who's an academic from Princeton. Kevin Corke, who is with Fox News. We had Joe Concha, we have Jennifer Say, and we have Ryan Walters, who they described in the Cryon as Oklahoma State superintendent, but they forgot the word school. So Ryan Walters is the Oklahoma State school superintendent, and has some really radical views about adding the Bible to classes. He's said some crazy things before. Very everything that would get shot down by the First Amendment in the courts, because we have separation of church and state. They also had a Democrat named Michael LaRosa. I just want to give them some credit for having a Democrat on the show. He didn't really say anything that I could pull, but they try a little bit. Fox News at Night is a little trippy because it's West Coast. So it's coming on East Coast very, very late at night, but it's not late there. So I wanted to include this show just because it was set up just like the other show that was discussing the debate. They had people behind a desk. They had a few people that were kind of coming in via Zoom or whatever. But most of the people were there. That it was very much like, we're going to discuss the debate. They did have a little bit about breaking news, especially what's going on between Iran and Israel, which is horrible. But they were talking about that a little bit, but it was mostly the debate. So here's the clip.
And a lot of people pointed to the fact that CBS said there were not going to be any fact checks, and they went ahead and they fact checked J.D. Vance on a couple of occasions.
To be fair, even with all of those measured responses, the American people are still going to vote for the top of the ticket and not the vice president. But tonight, he did no harm and he helped his ticket, and that's a win for the Trump team.
Laura?
What I really thought is when I saw Vance's response on abortion in particular, I thought, wow, Republicans are worried about abortion.
That was Lauren Wright, who was the academic from Princeton. She's on the show a lot, and she is pretty much always kind of straight down the middle. And yeah, I would say correct. Abortion is going to be a big one in this election. And I also want to add that the other comment by Erin Perny about he did no harm, I would say the same thing of Walz.
Because not a strong answer from Tim Walz. He really stumbled over this, and instead of giving the honest answer, which was he was not honest with the American people about his history, and this is one of many examples where they've been able to push in to show he isn't being honest. Instead, he was like, whoopsie poopsie. That's not a good enough answer for the American people.
Yeah, not only tonight. The moderators seem to fact-check J.D. Vance, not Tim Walz. That will be a very hot topic, not just on this show, but I suspect throughout the week.
So I just want to point out that the comment they made about were you in Tiananmen Square when you said you were, because we have sources that say you weren't there during Tiananmen Square, which they asked Tim Walz, and Tim Walz kind of fell on his sword and said, I misspoke. And he didn't answer that the best. It wasn't his finest moment there. But it's kind of laughable because probably what happened, I'm guessing, I can't see inside his head, Here's a man who went to China a lot. He was there around the time of Tiananmen Square. He just wasn't there when Tiananmen Square happened. He went there, I believe, later that summer. I'm not sure. Doesn't really matter. I think he was bragging. He told, something that wasn't true. I don't know. It sounds like it. It's what happens. People tell stories. I don't think that's as big of a deal as somebody like Trump lying about winning an election in 2020, which they just breeze right over. They don't care. Or Trump misrepresenting how tariffs work. Or Trump lying about pretty much everything that comes out of his mouth. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. The border was the most secure under my administration. That is not true. The black unemployment was the lowest when I was president. That is not true. We left $85 billion worth of equipment, or $86 billion of equipment in Afghanistan. That is not true. All of this is not true. We went 18 months without a single casualty in Afghanistan. Not true. I could just keep going. I have these memorized because he just constantly lies. So you have a guy who went to China all the time with students. It was like his thing. And he told a tall tale on a microphone, having no idea that he would one day run for vice president, and everything that he's ever said anywhere would be dissected and broken down. And it's come back to bite him. Again, I don't know exactly what happened. I'm just guessing here based on what I do know and what I saw in the debate. And they're going to be like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, but compared to Trump, no, absolutely not. Because Trump lies about things that are crucial. The stuff he said during COVID was just crazy, absolute lunacy. And just it's just a stream of lies. As somebody who fact checks is a huge part of my job, it's painful sitting through him. It's painful because I'm like, nope, lie. I mean, his debate he had with Biden, I had 53. They weren't all lies. Some of them were exaggerations. Some of them were things like, well, if I were president, we wouldn't have had this war, which you can't prove that. I'm sorry. I'm just having a moment here. We're going to move on. The word of the day again is fact check. Here we go.
Grace. I mean, they said part of the rules, we're not going to fact check. And boy, they started fact checking, but they only fact check JD Vance.
Amazing. If you're keeping score at home now, that means Donald Trump was fact-checked 5 times by ABC and J.D. Vance 3 times by CBS. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, 0.0 fact checks, in case you want to know if there's bias out there or anything.
I mean, it's interesting, Jennifer, because the whole time you have Tim Walz saying, we're pro-women. The whole transgender thing didn't play into that, but it kept saying, we love women. Do you?
Well, the Dems don't know what a woman is. I mean, it didn't come up, but we know that is true, that they can't define. They stumble. If you ask, well, what is a woman? They can't answer that question.
I wanted to include that because it was a great example of a Fox News host, which would have been Trace Gallagher that you heard in that clip, just kind of lobbing with a leading question to a guest, a topic that had not come up in the debate at all, which is transgender people. And she, Jennifer Say, has kind of an odd history. She used to be an executive at Levi Strauss. She butted heads with management after 23 years, dramatically left the company over COVID-19 restrictions and other things like that. And her whole thing is she started her own brand of clothing, and it's called XXXY. So it must have something to do with, again, gender or sex related to sports, however you want to call that. And she was wearing this kind of, I'd say, ridiculous T-shirt, because I think it's ridiculous to wear a T-shirt on national television on a news show. But that's what she does, because she's been on here before, and that's what she does. So she's promoting her brand. Just odd. They just totally just stuck that in. This next clip is Ryan Walters, and he is the, again, school superintendent in Oklahoma, who has radical ideas about infusing the Bible into every single grade level. And he's just basically just baiting the Supreme Court to take the case and try to, basically destroy our First Amendment. I'm just going to say that out loud. So here he is saying some outrageous things about the debate.
Yeah, it was fascinating. It shows you what the position of the Democrats have been, which is appease our enemies. Yeah, they're friends with school shooters. They're friends with Iran. They're friends with Russia. It's absurd. It doesn't work. But here's the reality. Their positions on education, they are running from them like crazy. They don't want to be talking about the Marxism they push on our kids, the fact that they wanted tampons in the boys' bathrooms over there in Minnesota, the fact that they've taught kids to hate our country.
So the tampon thing was actually debunked. Somebody called a bunch of schools in Minnesota and they didn't have tampons in boys' bathrooms. But it's like, technically they could, is basically what it is. If somebody requested them, they would. But they don't, it's not a standard thing. So that's been debunked. But of course, you know how they're going to cling to that. That and the sex change surgeries, which I'm sure there's like a handful of them. That's it. It's not that common. And they act like it's just this, everybody's just like who in their right mind's like, you know what? I feel like having incredibly painful, massive surgeries just because, the state's going to pay for it. I'm going to just do that. I'm going to just take advantage so I can change my gender. And what? No one's going to do that. I have friends that are trans. I have friends who've had surgery. It's like a whole ordeal. It takes a long time. It's not something you just go into a doctor and say, guess what? Guess what? You go on hormones. They have psychological screening. It's very, very, very dramatic and long and an arduous process. Anyway, just like, what the heck are we doing? So that's all the clips. It was an interesting, frothy little romp of going through Fox News covering the vice presidential debate as they were. I don't think either one really won. I think they both held their own. The comment they made about being friends of mass shooters was a misstatement that Walz made where he was talking about mass shooters. He got emotional, and I think he probably meant to say, I'm friends with victims of mass shooters, because that's what he was talking about. It came out wrong, and they're all like, oh, there you go. And I'm like, again, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets of the people who live there. I saw it on television. That's Trump. I just pulled that from memory. How many crazy things is that man going to say and tweet? And we're just going to gloss right over it. Gets people's names wrong, flips politicians, doesn't seem to know where he is, rambles on about the Panama Canal. This is a topic that obviously gets me worked up. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you'd like to check out more of my work, you can do so by going to X, also known as Twitter. I still call it Twitter. Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. I have a fan page. You can tell the difference. There's one that's very clearly a fan page that has Decoding Fox News on it. I'd also like to give a shout out again to my sponsor, and that sponsor would be the listeners of this podcast and the readers of my newsletter. If you would like to become a paid subscriber, because I cannot exist without paid supporters, cannot exist. There's nobody writing me a check every month. It all comes out of Substack, and it's tough. It's a hard road to do it this way. But if you'd like to become a paid subscriber, go to my Substack channel for Decoding Fox News, Patreon for Decoding Fox News. All paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. This week it should be some of the work I've done on Project 2025, Chapter 7. Chapter 8 is coming as well. And that's it. And if you can't afford to become a paid subscriber, share the podcast, share the newsletter, share my content on social media. That also helps tremendously. Give me a good review where you can. My beautiful, phenomenal mascots of the podcast, Odin and Thor, send their love, and I will see you at the next podcast.
Resolute Square.